So I'll go ahead and introduce our guest, though I know he needs no introduction. Today's guest is legendary in the world of design, as those of you may know, multiple best-selling author and a trailblazer who's forever changed the way we interact with objects and systems around us. You might know him from the foundational book, Design of Everyday Things, or perhaps from his other books, The Design of Future Things, Psychology of Everyday Things, Emotional Design, to name a few of some favorites. But our guest has without a doubt made a permanent impact on the craft of design, creating a more intuitive and human-friendly world with visionary ideas influencing a number of products and systems, companies that I'll name a few, such as Apple, IDEO, Nielsen Norman Group directly, as well as countless others through influencing as an educator with academic positions at UC San Diego, Harvard, Northeastern University. And today we're glad to have him here at UC Berkeley with us, joining virtually through Zoom. That said, Don does not rest on his laurels, still going at it, pushing the boundaries even further with the latest book, topic of today's discussion, Design for a Better World, Meaningful, Sustainable, and Humanity-Centered. In this book, the topic of today's discussion, he expands the focus from human-centered design to humanity-centered design, championing a more inclusive, sustainable, and globally minded approach. So please help me in welcoming the man who's been described as the visionary behind the revolution in human-centered design and author of Design of Everyday Things, now Design for a Better World, Don Norman.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome. I'd love to kick off the conversation with some questions that were inspired by the ones submitted ahead of time and some submissions, but also just out of my personal curiosity. So we can kick it off and say, why change the approach from human-centered design to humanity-centered design, as you describe it in the book, and why is it urgent today?
Human-centered design is really the paradigm of the 20th century, and actually before even the 19th century, because design originally started in the 1700s as a tool to sell more things. It was to increase companies' profits and companies' sales. So it started in England when the Wedgwood Company, which was making tableware, porcelain tableware, and they wanted to reach a larger audience, and they hired artists to paint, nice designs around the rims of the tableware. And that was the beginning of the design profession. The artists called themselves designers, actually, and it was sort of a beginning path for design, which was part of the economic capitalism of those days and of today, which is where design was this intermediate stage in a company, which made the products more beautiful and therefore more attractive to customers. Today, design is much more than that. We aren't just making things beautiful. We're actually capable of changing the world. But I'm concerned that we don't actually have that power or authority because people don't call on designers to make major decisions. So, for example, if you work in a company, or for that matter, if you're at a university, design is usually not the most important component. And in a company, nobody thinks of asking the designers what products they want to make. Well, why not? We understand better than anyone else what people really need or what people really have to have. So that's human-centered design. And I think the principles of human-centered design are excellent. I helped develop many of them. But the point is there to understand the individual people and what they are trying to accomplish and how we can help them. That's all very fine. But we ignored completely the impact of our work upon the world, upon the ecology, upon other cultures. And so it's time to change. So, for example, we make these wonderful devices. Here's one in my pocket. It's a cell phone. And it's nice and thin and attractive and beautiful and works well. But the people who designed it, do they ever think about the destruction of the environment that's required to mine the exotic materials required to make this? Did they ever think about the destruction of the ecology and the manufacturing plants, which would spew out fumes into the air or poison into the waters or the land? Did they ever think about the fact that we made it so thin and so nice and light and portable that it's almost impossible to repair? You can't take this one apart to change the battery, not easily, not the average person. And so what happens is it's designed to last, 2 or 3 years, and then you buy a new phone. And then it's so difficult to take apart that you can't take it apart to reclaim the valuable materials that are inside it. And so it gets thrown away into trash piles. In India, for example, there are mountains of trash, electronic trash discarded, burning, poisonous fumes in the air. Why is it burning? Well, because the batteries, as they get older and older and start decaying, heat up and cause fires. So, in waving my hands, I just accidentally made a phone call, evidently. That's another thing which really distresses me is the attempt to make this so beautiful that we don't allow any edges around the edge of our tablets and our phones. And in fact, if you have a slight edge, the journalists complain, oh, yeah, no good. Which means I can almost never answer my phone because when I pick it up, my thumb gets on the screen and moves the phone call to some other mysterious place or hangs up. Or in this particular case, evidently made a phone call. Yes. They may call me back while we're talking. So it's time that we actually expanded our views. It's time that we took account of all of humanity. So the whole purpose of humanity-centered design is to keep what's good about human-centered design and build upon it. But instead of thinking about the impact upon the individuals, we also, in addition, think about the impact upon the world. We have to change the kind of materials we use, the way things are manufactured, and the ability to repair, the ability to take the unit apart, and so you can reclaim the materials. We call this the circular economy, that ideally we should act like nature. I didn't bring my banana, but I often bring a banana and an orange when I give talks like this, and I show you, this is the banana and this is an orange. Look how well it's packaged by nature. It has a skin that protects fruit, and another skin on the orange, a big, hefty, robust one that protects the fruit. And when I finish eating, I can throw the skins on the ground because they will decompose and simply be fertilizer for new plants to grow. Well, we don't do that with our artificial stuff. If we throw it on the ground, it causes great havoc. So it's time to change, and that's what humanity-centered design is about.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I totally agree with a lot of that. I know you talked a lot about a lot of those topics in the book. I think a good follow there that I'd like to ask is, so I have a quote here from the book. You mentioned, you basically call to action people to change the question and say, we must question and re-examine all the things that we take for granted, no matter how ordinary, sensible, and logical they seem, right? As you described, all of these complex systems, you can say the world is a mess. So where does an individual designer, a lot of our students might be seeking entry-level jobs, or maybe people joining or seeing reporting. So they're individual designer, they feel like cog in the machine. You would imagine that all the systems that you described, right, kind of want a yes person to just execute. How does a single person start shifting more humanity-centered?
That's a really good question, and it's the heart of what I really care about. And it has two different components. One is, how can designers make a difference and as a profession? And second is, how can an individual make a difference as simple one people among 8 billion? Well, the answer to the first one is maybe the most important. So before I go into that, I'll answer the second question first. How can an individual make a difference? You can't, not very easily. But you can band together. And when you band together into groups can make a difference. Because who will we try to convince? Who does it matter that we have concerns? There are several different groups of people. One of them is the executives of major companies that are making the stuff that is destroying the world. And the second is politicians. And the reason politicians are important is because a lot of these issues are, yes, they're technical, and they have to do with technology. For example, Bill Gates wrote a really good book about the technology concerns with climate change and recommendation for things we should do to change that. His recommendations are all excellent, but he doesn't talk about politics. In fact, he says specifically, I'm not going to talk about politics. Oh, he's missing the point. The points are that the problem is not technology. The problem is human behavior. And politicians are all about human behavior. So the good side of politics is when you have different people with different points of view and therefore different requirements getting together. And then often the requirements seem incompatible. The good sign of politics is when they get together to try to figure out some compromise solution. Sometimes you could even think about the new solution where nobody has to make a compromise. It satisfies everybody. But often you also have to compromise your position many times in order to make progress and to make the world a better place. But who do the politicians listen to? Now, you may say, well, they listen to the money, who gives them the funds so they can get reelected. They want to stay in power. That's true. But they also listen to the voters. And the voters are what happens when you form a group. You become a powerful voting group that can make a difference in the lives of politicians, and for that matter, companies, because companies depend upon people to buy their products. And so groups have tremendous amount of power. And so there are lots of groups that are advocating for all of the sort of things I've been writing about, and your job is to find them. But actually, if you find them, send me a note and let me know, because I have a website where I'm trying to list all of these groups so you can go and find out what you can do. So my website name is JND, which is a psychology term from the field of psychophysics, which means just noticeably different. What can you do to be noticeably different? So my website is jnd.org, and that's where I put my articles and my notes and videos and all that. Posted a few things this morning. Second, I have a website just for this book. So the book is called Design for a Better World, and DBW. So the website for that is dbw.jnd.org. And that's where I list the places where you could join and find groups and make a difference. Now, the second problem is how come nobody listens to designers? We have engineers and marketing people who become the CEOs of major companies. It's very rare for a designer to be the CEO of a major company. In fact, I don't think there is any yet. It's very rare to have a designer who's a chief design officer at what's called the C-suite, where the leading executives of the company gather together. Only a few companies, a handful, have chief design officers. I mean large companies. Lots of small companies have this, but not large multinational companies. Why not? And when I speak to designers, they say, nobody pays any attention to us. And I say, well, how do you talk to your boss? And they say, oh, we show them all the wonderful work we've done or the prizes we've won. And I say, yeah? What is one of the principles of good design? One of the principles is to understand who your customers are, who the people you're designing for are. And I say, well, who are you designing for? And they answer me, well, the person who's using the cell phone or using this kitchen appliance or using what I'm building. Yeah, that's one of the people you're designing for. But one of the most important people you're designing for is your boss, or maybe more importantly, the boss of your boss, or maybe the boss of the boss of your boss. And how do you talk to them? Well, again, we show them the wonderful work. And I say, when I was an executive, vice president at Apple, if somebody came to me and told me they did really wonderful work, I would listen. I would say, thank you very much, and that's very nice. That's why we hired you. And now, excuse me, but I must get back to work. Telling them you're wonderful doesn't do any good. You have to learn to speak their language, and the language of executives is, well, what gets them promoted? They get promoted because they've either decreased the cost to the company or they've increased the income, that means sales, or they come out with a new revolutionary product that actually makes a real difference in the world. And so what you have to do is not tell them you're wonderful, but show them what they could do differently. And that would be a good thing for A, the company, and B, the world. And how do you show them that? We show them wonderful pictures, and we show them our designs and so on. That's not the language of business. The language of business is spreadsheets. You have to show the increased sales and the increased profits and the increased margins, et cetera, or maybe decreased costs. And my design friends say, oh, but how do we know that? I mean, this is a whole new idea. How do we know what's going to sell? How do we know what's going to do this or that? And I say, well, there's marketers do that all the time. Marketing insists that you add these features to your product, and they convince the executives by showing spreadsheets. And how do they do that? Well, they make up the numbers. They lie. And it's okay, though, because the executives used to do the same things themselves, so they know that these are not real numbers. And so you could make up numbers just as well as marketing can. But the executives are not stupid. They know there's no real way to get the numbers. So they ask, where did you get these numbers from? What are the assumptions you made? Did you do out any market research to test people about what they would like or not like and what they would buy or not buy? And so what are those basic assumptions? And if they're reasonable, they will listen to you. And they might even say, yeah. So that's a very long answer to the question. But I think is fundamental. I want designers to get promoted in the company. And you only get promoted in the company if you take a broader view than design itself. Your view has to be looking at the whole company. And then, of course, looking at the world and its impact, the company's impact upon the world. And that's how you reach a position of power. And that's how we could actually change the world and make a difference.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was super insightful. I definitely have some follow-ups that came to mind during that. I do want to emphasize the ability of folks here in the class to ask any questions. If you have any of that resonates with you, or if you have any follow-up, feel free to raise your hand now or at any time during the back and forth. So I'll pause, see if we'll yes, feel free to come on, and we can ask a follow-up to follow. So we have one of our students who will walk up here and want to ask you a question. And similarly, there can be more back the lessons.
Is there a way? The problem with here is I can't see the student.
Yeah, so I think the student in this. So, hi, feel free to introduce yourself and.
No, but I can't. I thought the video view does not include.
Does it include me too?
Oh, let me see. I've been looking at it. There we go. Where is the student? Hello.
Okay, sorry if I'm a little shaky. It's a big deal for me. So this is a follow-up to what you were just talking about, and I actually have this question form before you started talking about it, so I'm going to edit a little bit. But since you consider economics to play a role in the shift from humanity-centered design to human-centered design to humanity-centered design, how do you see this changing? So if everyone's driven by economics and politics, profit, how do you encourage people to focus on other aspects other than profits and the economic world?
These are really good questions. And good questions, though, are often difficult to answer. And in fact, the best questions, we don't know the answers. And so I may have to go on for a while because we live in a world that's a system. I call it a socio-technical system. And it includes the entire world, and we are components in this complex system. It kind of means everything is connected to everything else. So if you want to make a better world, you have to do the systems analysis. In this case, it's the economic principles that our modern capitalist system depends upon. Now, these are not fundamental to capitalism. In fact, Adam Smith, the inventor of capitalism, if you will, he argued that there are some real flaws if companies basically misbehave. And that's what's happened, is that the way we have capitalism is supposed to be where companies compete with each other on equal grounds, and as a result, their products get better and better, and their behavior gets better and better because they're rewarded by people purchasing the things that are good for them and also maybe good for the world. But that's not what is developed. So we have to change this system. We have to change the economics. And there was a Nobel Prize winner in economics who once said that, a company does not have any obligation to its employees or to its customers or to the environment where it's located, but its only obligation is to the shareholders, the people who own the company. Well, that's wrong, and that's evil. And because most of the shareholders only care about, well, I invested in money in your company, and I want you to give me a whole lot more money back. So they're only really interested in profits. And it's the shareholders, and the shareholders today are not individual peoples. They're often big corporations. They're not interested in what the company does. They're interested in profits. And that's what's wrong. And we have to change this. Now, fortunately, many leading businesses are arguing against this philosophy. Many leading economists are saying, that's not really the way it ought to be. We ought to put basically, what is good for the world? That ought to be one of the major things that companies should be concerned with. And yes, companies should make a profit because we want them to stay in business, but they don't have to make obscene profits. So we have to change that whole philosophy, and that change is beginning. Because up to now, in most business schools, people were taught how to maximize profit, and that's changing. We're starting to change the education of future business leaders. And I think there's a whole bunch of companies that have switched, by the way. Most companies in the United States are corporations, and there are several different kinds of corporations. Small companies are what's called an S Corp. The Nielsen Norman Group is an S Corporation. But most companies are C Corps. You don't have to know the technical meaning, but that's what a normal company is. But there is a one that's now called a B Corp, a B Corporation. And what those companies are they are ones who say, we put customers, the environment, the world first, and profit second. And a good company like this is Patagonia. So Patagonia really believes firmly in that without not doing harm. And so they manufacture their clothing. They're mostly a sporting goods company, but they've done a really good job of reusing materials, reusing their own stuff, which when you wear it out, you return it and they can reuse the materials. But they manufacture things that are reused materials. They really minimized the difficult harm to the environment. And we need to make that model stronger and more pervasive. I don't know if that's a sufficient answer, and that's a really long answer. I apologize. But is that okay?
Yeah, I do have it's more of a follow-up comment, but we talked about P Corps, and I think that in the past, even now, we're seeing that focusing on ecological and social and environmental benefits actually does create a profit in the long term, or just, for that better economic outturn in the future. But how do we incentivize people to focus on that, the long-term goals instead of just short-term profit?
I believe that there's a lot of evidence that we can do good for the world without doing harm for the company. And that, as you point out, if we treat people better, employees better, you may pay them more money, you may give them more days off, you may give them more health benefits. And guess what? Yes, this costs you more money, but actually, in the long term, you come ahead because your employees are more loyal, they stay with you longer, they actually are more incentivized to do a good job. And so there's no reason that anything that we're talking about should be an extra expense. But how do we convince people of that? And how do we make that happen? Well, I think it's starting to happen. But again, when part of the earlier answer was that we have to organize ourselves in groups. And if groups of people keep insisting to companies that they change their behavior, they will. So there's a lot of manufacturing in other countries around the world where it's basically slave labor. But groups have protested about this. And groups go in and they discover where this is happening and they protest to the companies. And guess what? It has made a big difference in the way companies take offshore manufacturing. They used to say, well, we don't know what's going on there. Well, now they do. And they are changing their behavior. So it is possible to change the behavior. It's possible to change the thrust to doing good for the world. And it's possible to change the thrust on how we treat employees, especially in other countries. And I think it's a good sense of change. The part of what's happening is that we're destroying the ecosystem, which is leading to major climate change problems. So how we treat our employees actually turns out affecting the climate, if you will. And the real issue about climate change is nobody took it seriously for 20, 25 years. We've known about it because people don't respond to things that are a future event. They respond to things that happen. People are really good at responding to a problem, but they're not good at preventing the problem. Well, the good news about climate change is that it's causing danger, it's causing havoc, it's causing fires, it's causing floods, it's causing famine. It's here. And so people are taking it seriously. And so the issues you're asking me about are being taken seriously because those are part of the causal issues of climate change.
Thanks so much for that question and response, Doc. Any follow-ups from that from the class? I know there's at least one question that was in, but any follow-ups? I think everyone in the class, I saw you raise your hand earlier too.
Meanwhile, I see a question, how do I think of progress being the solution? It depends upon your definition of progress. So that the technological definition of progress is, we build something that's faster, better, cheaper, or more expensive. No, that's not progress. Progress is improving the world. So I don't call that going backwards. I call that going forward. Change your definition of progress.
So we have a student here who introduce yourself and feel free to ask.
Hi, Don. This is really an honor to speak to you. I wanted to ask, kind of like behind you.
Just hold on. I can't see you yet. So.
Sorry, I was in the wrong screen.
There you are. Thank you.
Hi, it's really an honor to speak to you. I was kind of curious about like the motivations behind writing your book. Like, how do you stay or remain hopeful for change? I feel like my generation or myself, we're born into like so many existing systems, and that like staying optimistic for positive change is difficult. So I'm just like really curious, like how do you have so much hope for like just kind of like battling against like so much like negative changes?
Well, I'm getting old, and as I'm getting old, I'm starting to reflect upon my life and what I can do in whatever remaining years. I'm 87 years old, so give me another 10 years maybe. And as I was thinking about this, I realized that my books in the past have all been about making products easier to use, easier to understand, etc. And that's nice. I think it has done good, which doesn't change the world. And so I thought, I've had a really varied background. I have 2 degrees in engineering. I have a PhD in psychology. I've been in psychology departments. I've started cognitive science departments. And now I've been an industry executive. I've been, now call myself a designer. I've had a lot of experience, and maybe it's time to take and use that experience to do something that might change the world. And that's why I wrote this book. And who am I counting on to make these changes work? I'm counting on you, plural. As you said, the younger generation, the people who are now getting educated, about to go into the workforce. And it's a lot of the answers to the questions you're going to ask me or already have asked me have to come from you. Because you're the new generation that's going to make a big difference. I'm the old going away generation, and I'm part of the generation that got us into this mess. And so I know it's kind of unfortunate for me to say, and it's therefore up to you to get out of the mess. But you are the hope we have.
Thank you, Doc.
Okay, thank you. So we have a more follow here.
Here's me down. In your book, you talk about that the modernity of the modernized society actually pose more harm to the environment. It generates permanent garbage and also like pollutions. So my question is, let's say scientists are about to design a kind of product that can fulfill a fully sustainable environment, and maybe during the design process, it poses more harm to the environment. So maybe scientists are testing chemical and they don't know what chemical they should use, so they do a lot of tests on different materials, and maybe some of them are very toxic and produce more pollution. So should the scientists continue on this kind of design process? Yeah.
So that's actually a really nice question, because you're getting at the system analysis that quite often we look at the benefits of a new technology, say, or a new way of doing things, and we ignore all the side effects, the cost of getting there in the first place, or the other things that, just take electric vehicles, for example. The batteries are, today, the materials required for the batteries are very difficult to get, destroying the environment to get, and manufacturing the batteries pollutes the air, pollutes the environment. And as you say, you point out, a lot of scientific research is done in ways that really are unethical, because they also cause poison or even sometimes diseases if there's an accident in the laboratory. Well, those aren't necessary. I'm a firm believer in the scientific method, because the scientific method believes in evidence. There's evidence that lets you move to understand whether what you're doing is good or bad. We often don't use that evidence, though, on the way that we do the science. And what you are saying is, yes, it's time for scientists to pay attention to how they run their experiments and what they do in their laboratories. But I believe all that can be done. In fact, many countries do that. Many companies do this. When we do experiments in the laboratories, in universities, there are very strict rules about making sure that we're doing things safely, that we're not polluting the air, that we're not injuring people. In fact, sometimes people complain they can barely do the work. There are so many rules they have to follow. But there are also rules about how we treat animals and how we treat people when we use them to do experiments. And I believe that problem is solvable. We simply need more. The problem is that many companies don't believe they have to follow the same rules and the same guidelines. So if the guidelines already exist and universities are forced to follow them, any university that has government money is forced to follow it. And this is true in most countries in the world, by the way, not just the United States. But lots of industry feels that they are exempt from this and don't have to worry about it. Well, they should be following the very same regulations.
Thank you, Doc.
So I think students are formally supposed. We want to give one chance to Q&A here. I think we can give the chance to answer live. We'll test this, see how it goes, and we select the symbol. So we've invited you on June to ask this question live. So,
I just answered it.
Yeah, that one was there. So I'll just ask a personal question that I think came out of what you just said there, in addition to one of these here. So I think I have to go here. I see a question in this panel in the Q&A. AI So I know today there are tools that can generate websites, do a lot of the jobs that designers as people do, but from a different method. So I see a question in the chat about GPT, which is a type of AI, right? So I know people, you write in the book that people are not machines. People don't behave the same way as machines. But, given that people, and some may argue that AI can implement some of the principles described in the book, right? Come to some of the human-centered conclusions. Is that possible? Can artificial intelligence be humanity-centered? Personal question.
I'm very optimistic. In fact, this morning I just posted a long post on my main website about GPT because, by the way, I hate the name GPT. I can never remember what it stands for, and it's a name that describes the technology. But the new chat GPTs, and the one that's especially GPT number 4, which is not completely released yet. Recently, the folks at Microsoft who mainly the GPT was developed by a company called OpenAI, but Microsoft has been their main funder, billions and billions of dollars worth of funding. And the Microsoft people just released a paper, and it's about 15 authors on the paper, and the paper is 150 pages long, but I strongly recommend it. It's easy to understand. It doesn't require you to understand the technology. It's telling you about what the capabilities and the limits of this technology are. So I really recommend that. And if you go to my website, jnd.org, right on the front page, you can find a statement, a pointer to, first of all, the paper, but second of all, to a 48-minute video by the leading author of the paper. That is really wonderful because he's really telling you about the surprises that he himself encountered in testing the very thing that he had been building. And so is it going to take away our jobs? It's going to take away the routine part of our jobs. I'm really assuming that this is going to end up being a collaboration. So, for example, there was an artist who recently won a prize as the greatest, it's really wonderful art. And when people discovered it really had come from one of these AI programs, they got all annoyed and upset and say, you didn't deserve the prize. But the artist said, look, that program didn't just do the art. You know how long it took me? It took me 1 month to use that program to get the picture that I finally submitted. And I did 800 different tries. And as far as I'm concerned, that the machine was a collaborator. I would try to phrase what I'm looking for. It would give me a response. I would say, no, that's not right. And I would then try to figure out how I explain what I really wanted. We went back and forth for a whole month. But it did something that I could not have done by myself. But also, the machine couldn't have done by itself either. And the combination is what is powerful. And I think that's the future. There already are generative AI programs that Autodesk sells and that people can use. And some of the designers who've used it said, I was scared of it at first. I thought it would take away my creativity and it would take over my job. But no, I discovered it made me more powerful. Because instead of spending hours and hours drawing correctly, etc., making sure everything was proper, the machine takes care of that. I can sit back and be a designer and say, ooh, that isn't the right product at all. Let's rethink that. Let's redo that. And they say after, they used to be opposed to it, but after using it for a while, they would never go back. Would you go back to a world where you didn't have calculators? When calculators were first introduced, oh my goodness, people won't remember arithmetic anymore. It's going to change everything. Spelling correctors, people won't learn how to spell anymore. So I think that this new AI is going to be very powerful in making our jobs different and better. We will do work better than we've ever done before. People who are using chat today to write papers, there was a recent nice study at MIT that said, when you did this as a collaboration, going back and forth, getting the first draft done was done much faster. Because it's really hard to get going. And so you let the machine get going. But then you read what it's done, you say, no. But you've gotten going. And so then you can actually make improvements very rapidly. So people spent more time revising than they ever did before. The total time was less because they spent less time trying to get started, but they spent more time perfecting the results. Someone just sent me a long paper, and I said, I don't want to read it. So I put it into chat, and I said, summarize it in about 200 words, like an abstract. And I read it, and I said, that's pretty good. So I sent it to the people who wrote the paper. And they said, well, it's pretty good, but it missed the main point. And I said, good. Because people hate to write abstracts. You've written the paper, oh, the work is done, and now, oh, I got to write an abstract. As people don't really spend much time at it. Well, it's really nice if you ask chat to abstract it, because then you have a first draft. And then, okay, it missed the most important point. I will rewrite the abstract properly. But come to think of it, if I missed the most important point, maybe I didn't write the paper right. Maybe I didn't stress that most important point sufficiently in the paper. So I think that these things are going to make us better.
It's a very optimistic view. I know there's another question here. So I don't know if there's a lot of responsibility in building these AI tools. So come on and ask them another question for moments.
So,
Yeah.
hi, it's very nice to meet you. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to ask the follow up regarding AI and everything. I would say because in this age where like AI is very able to generate even like text, images, videos, and I'm assuming a lot of more things in the future. I'm wondering what type of skills would be important for humans to do, and would those skills be maybe potentially more on the ethical sides of building things? Would it be more towards the maybe just like refining whatever creations are created by AI? I'm curious as to sharing your thoughts on that.
Well, there's several issues there. One of them is that it's difficult to answer the question today because what we're talking about is something that's really quite new. These really very powerful tools are how old? A year? They aren't that old, and so they are changing rapidly every day. They seem to change. So the GTP4, which came out, is much, much better than 3. But even if you look at the talk that I recommended, the video, the person who's the lead author of this paper says, even while they were writing the paper, the system kept changing. New releases came out, and suddenly what they said was possible wasn't possible anymore, or new things were possible, both directions. And so we have to wait a little bit until the system settle down a little bit to be able to answer your question. Because you're asking the question that when these become everyday tools that are around, how do we have to change our behavior? Well, part of that, though, is that how do we change the tools so that they are becoming more collaborative as opposed to taking over? And there are a lot of people working on just that problem. There's a group headed by a friend of mine, Ben Schneiderman. He's a professor of computer science at the University of Maryland. And he has a group that now has 6,000 members discussing how to make AI, humanistic AI, if you will, humanity-centered AI. And these include many, many of the people who are developing the systems. And so the answer to your question is, we are going to have to learn how to behave differently, but we also have to learn how to build these systems differently so they are truly designed from the beginning as a collaborative tool, as opposed to a let's take over tool. And yes, we will have to learn how to use these tools and experiment with them. And I recommend you do it today. So for example, Microsoft's tool is available free. You just, it's built into their browser and built into their systems. And you can use it on Apple computers as well. You aren't stuck in Microsoft's world. And there are other ones as well that are starting to come out. I recommend you all experiment with it and learn how you can use it for good, not to cheat on essay exams, but to actually improve the work you're doing. And to professors, I'm saying it's going to be too easy to cheat on essay exams, but why do you ask for essay exams? In fact, why do you say people must work all by themselves, not allowed to ask other people for help, or not allowed to copy from another person's paper? No, we should encourage people to do that, because that's how real work is done. Real work is done by teams helping each other. And so if I'm trying to write a paper for you and my friend has written a paper about the same topic, I should be able to take some paragraphs out, put it in mine. But I'm not cheating. I will give that person credit. And you will grade my paper not on did I write everything, but did I put things together in a way that's informative and useful? And give credit. This part was written by my computer system, GPT. This part, GPT and I worked together, and we spent actually a week refining the picture, the diagram, or whatever you're doing. So that I think is the future. Working together collaboratively, given credit to the different components, to the different people who have helped you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the follow-up there. I'll close off this AI discussion with some of the questions we see in the Q&A, and then give a chance to Rachel here to ask this question to you directly. But one thing that I saw come up in this Q&A as a follow-up is the training of these AI models would say there's very costly in terms of electricity. I've heard a similar critique of things like cryptocurrencies or some of these other technologies that are trying to make a big disruption. They have some purported benefits, but then huge environmental impact. So I'll frame this environmental question for Rachel, but I'll give her a chance to answer one.
Hi, is this the moment?
Yes.
Hi. Okay, I'm Rachel Hellegress. I work at the Berkeley Lab and I design climate research tools. I spent a year in the design community in the Bay Area trying to help the design community engage with the climate challenges. And while the challenges are huge, the biggest challenge that I found in that was educating the design community. It was really hard to get them focused on things that would actually protect the climate. So I wondered, Don, if you had any academic programs you knew about that were addressing that issue about design's role in climate. Thank you for your book that does a lot of that work, but also in the academic sphere, my question.
Well, actually, I'm hoping that this book, one of the reasons that my books have worked well is because they get used as textbooks. And I hope this could be a textbook because it includes a lot of directions that are highly relevant to your question. And a lot of these problems I blame designers for. And it's not the designers as people, it's the education that designers get. Now, I'm talking at Berkeley, which is different because it's the universities, the large-scale universities, which basically have many, many different fields and different people are not the problem. The problem is design academies, where it's a school of art and design usually. And first of all, design shouldn't be lumped with art because it's quite different. And second of all, people learn the skills of the craft of design, but they don't learn about the world. They don't learn about politics. They don't learn about humanity. They don't learn about history. They don't learn about technology. They don't learn about people. And so the designers are not in a position to do things. And as I said earlier, quite often they're in the middle layer of a company and they can only do what they're asked to do. If they complain, they get fired. Because they don't know how to complain. They don't know how to present not problems, but solutions. So I think that we have to re-educate designers. And I think the people in the design program at Berkeley, the Jacobs School of Design, or whatever it's called, have to have a broader education in business, politics. And you want to know who knows most about people? It's not psychologists, it's not sociologists or anthropologists. It's people in literature. If you write a novel, you have to be a wonderful observer of people because you have to be able to describe the way people really react and the way people really are. Whereas the other fields in universities are always specialists. So the specialists in this and specialists in that, specialists even within a department, people often don't understand the work that other people in the department do because it's so specialized. And so very seldom in psychology or sociology or anthropology do we study the entire person and the community. We study whatever our specialty is. So people in literature, we want to have more literature in our design program.
There is another follow-up from a student.
Well, have we here? So on the topic of generative AI, so Images made these programs kind of amalgamate artworks, and they skip the steps of concept design, ideation, and instead focus on the final rendered product. I'm an illustrator, so I believe the human experiences behind a piece of art are essential for the work to actually have the meaning that it does. So in this way, I believe that these can only lead to the style of generating works can only really lead to the deterioration of already worsening perceptions of art. So I was wondering what your thoughts are from this kind of perspective, and what is the role of these AI programs in improving the art process when the point of the art is the human, and I would say humanity's sense process.
I think that you are wrong. And I think you will like this, I hope. That I think that you said that it skips the whole, thinking about the problem and conceptualizing it and trying to get trying to do the research in the beginning before you even start your art. No. That's where your work, human work, is so critically important. Because, look, it's a program. And it works because you give it a prompt. You say, I would like you to do this. Now, what is the this that you're going to say? The this should be a result of your deep thoughts and your research into what it is you're trying to illustrate or trying to portray. And when you then explain it, it will all usually come out not what you have in mind at all. But you have something. You can say, no, and you could try to adjust it, change it. And that's where it becomes collaborative. But it does not skip that first step. It appears to, because the machine can't do that yet at this point. We do that. We're the ones who create what we think the issue is and what we're trying to portray. We're the ones who also judge the output and modify it until we finally get something that really satisfies us. And the nice part about doing this is usually when you start doing this, it isn't that the machine is doing what you're really asking for. It may do something that was quite different. And you'll say, ooh, I never thought of that. That's exciting. Let's go up in that direction. And that's where the great power comes.
As a follow-up, can I ask if you think that the potential benefits of this kind of art making outweigh the expenses, I guess, and the detriments to the artists whose work is unconsensually used in these models or modeling now, I guess, just models?
I can't answer. I don't know. But it is true that some routine artwork or routine writing can be done by these machines. So, for example, in writing, the machines already are being used to do reports of company meetings and of sports. So a high school team, a small college's team, they play games, and the newspaper can't afford to have reporters out there. But if you simply report all of the scores and the people, et cetera, these machines can write a really good article, which gets published in the papers. And so every little game can be covered in the newspapers, which let's assume including online reports. And I think the same might be true of everyday illustration and sign making and art. But I think that the good artists will actually benefit, not be hurt, because the good artist, if you step back and say, is this a tool that can help me create and illustrate things I couldn't have done before, or do it in a way that's even better? I think there's hope for that. Now, unfortunately, the history of technology has not always been kind. That is, new technologies like the invention of machines to making cloth and clothes, for example, did put people out of work. It put the weavers out of work. In the end, it increased the employment, but the people who were put out of work did lose their jobs and weren't able to find new jobs. And that's not good. And I think we have to be aware of that and be concerned about that. But I do believe that these tools also have the benefit of making even everyday work better and more exciting and better for everybody, including the people who are being paid to do the work. But that's my optimism, and I don't have any data yet. It's too soon to have data about that.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that thoughtful response. And yeah, I think just tying it back to the whole discussion about systems, right? I can see how some of the danger is in systems that are just commodifying artwork and are just, maybe don't care about the process and are using it for advancing.
But remember when photography was first introduced, people said, oh my goodness, that's horrible. It's going to destroy the role of artists. And yes, for artists who were trying to do realistic pictures, that turns out that market went away because we could do that with cameras. But first of all, photographers learned how to be more creative in what they were doing. And second of all, artists learned how to benefit from photography. So many of the artists go around taking lots and lots of pictures and they hang them up around their studio, which inspires them to create something that's novel and original.
So I know we are here. We have time for one more question for you, Bell.
Yeah, I have time. Do you?
Oh, we have. Yeah. So I think we have some other questions for the students. Would someone like to cap off, or we have also a queue of questions here? So I will ask your question and we can cap off the discussion. Thanks for spending this time with us. Yeah, we'll just.
Hi. Not sure what time it is where you are, but good morning.
I'm in San Diego, same time zone.
Perfect. Okay. I'm Liz, and it's really nice to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask just about what, the broader view of this framework. How differently do you see humanity-centered design potentially addressing social inequities in ways that maybe other frameworks didn't before? I know you previously kind of created human-centered design, and your new book kind of touches on the differences. But so just what it potentially will address differently. And secondly to that, do you predict any shortcomings in the near future from this new framework?
Well, the whole philosophy of humanity-centered design is to address exactly the kinds of issues you mentioned, to address the negative impact of colonialism, to address the negative impact of destruction of people's cultures all around the world, of the indigenous peoples. And, that's the goal. But whether that happens is going to be, it's because there'll be a lot of fights and disagreements and so on. And it's going to be hard, but I think it's possible. And but that's part of the goal. Is that in fact what you want? There's a wonderful book by Arturo Escobar about living in the pluralverse. That there are many different kinds of cultures, and we shouldn't try to say everybody should be the same. We should say real benefits of many of these different cultures, and why not encourage those cultures to expand their benefits and expand the way they live, but permit to have different styles of life. And that's part of what humanity is about.
Thank you. And just back to the conversation that we've been having with all these new technologies that are coming forward, I guess just in what you might know now, can you predict any maybe shortcomings of this framework, or maybe how differently humanity-centered design might evolve with time?
it was hard to predict how humanity-centered design will evolve. In fact, given that it's hasn't really even taken off yet, I'm hoping my book will help it take off. Second, one of the major problems today, and I've seen questions in the chat about it, is, speaking of chat, if you take a look at Chat GTP, it is really harmful of the environment because the amount of electricity required to generate, say, the Chat GTP number 4 is huge. It uses hundreds of millions or even trillion different parameters and different computational nodes and so on. It uses a tremendous amount of computer power, and where does it? How do you run the computers? We use electricity. Where does the electricity come from? And it's enough electricity to cover thousands, tens of thousands of homes just to run this program. So at this point, only large companies can afford to do this. So there are two issues. Only large companies can afford to do this, not everyday people. If you had a new idea for doing a new kind of generative AI, you couldn't afford the resources required to actually run the computer programs. And second is destroying the environment because of the way we generate electricity today, which is mostly by fossil fuels. And I don't know how we overcome that because the newer systems are going to be even bigger and more powerful. We've already heard of the crypto world. The development, the mining of Bitcoins is extremely harmful to the environment and to the distribution of electric power, and sometimes taking away power from more important, useful needs just for the mining of Bitcoins. So we have to change all of that. And that's going to be hard, but I think it's possible. And one way to change it is that we make sure that the electricity comes from non-destructive sources, which is usually it's either hydroelectric or it's solar or it's wind.
Thank you so much.
Great. We'll give a chance for one more of the Zoom questions. And I think we'll go to I know you've already spent over the predicted time. So we'll pass it to Yusuf, who I think will round off this question. Go for it. Sure.
Thank you so much for all that you've been able to provide us with the wisdom this session. My question is almost trying to tie everything together. So in my own experience of trying to be far-reaching and reading across disciplines, across literature, ecology, really connecting with my emotions and tying design into all of that, I find myself in quite an isolated position and maybe even fitting in less and less with the status quo, so to speak. So my question is, like, how does one navigate going against the tide to be able to like ride the wave of this new, the new beginning that we're beginning to see?
Stick to it. The all major changes basically require a few brave people in the beginning to do things that other people don't respect, don't understand, don't know where it fits in. But if you can get other people to agree with you and other people to band together, a small group of people, which then becomes a larger group of people moving in this direction, you can change the way the field goes. And then guess what? In the beginning, nobody understood you and it scolded you. And in the end, everybody says, oh, how brilliant you were. What a great leader. I mean, that's the story of my life. When I started in psychology, I had 2 degrees in electrical engineering before I entered psychology. I applied information processing, understanding the rules to what I was trying to understand in psychology. And psychology was really backwards in those days. It was all behaviorism. It was all the work of B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning. And my first job was at Harvard. And when I got to Harvard and I was introduced to the faculty at Harvard, B.F. Skinner, the most famous psychologist in the world, actually, of the 20th century, he stood up and he denounced me and my work. I wanted to know why I was there. And, Yeah, I used to give talks at places where the audience would love it, and the students would love it, and the young faculty would love it, and the department chair would hate it and would tell me things like, I'm really angry that I'm forced to pay your transportation costs to give that talk because that was a disgrace to the community. Well, no, it was a disgrace to his view of the community. I believe that we ought to study the mind, we ought to study what was important in the world and not the way psychology used to be. And with the same sort of thing has been true in all the works. And other people too. If you look at other scientists, quite often their work was ignored at first because it wasn't understood. But if you stick to it, and if you are really convinced you're doing something that's important, then you should be able to also bring other people who understand your work, younger people. And that group becomes more and more powerful. You start publishing. You may even have to start your own journal and conference in order to do it, but do it. And guess what? You'll be considered one of the leaders of this really positive change.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
What a great way to round off the conversation. So yeah, we'll state again, I mean, we can't thank you enough, Don, for spending the time with us today. I know the students had the chance to ask questions, and there were a lot of, in the Q&A, some, I think we touched on the essence of a lot of them, but yeah, students who ask questions, really appreciate it. I appreciate your time here. I think this book will be influential, and we're excited to read it all of us with UC Berkeley. So thanks for spending the time with us.
I enjoyed being here and talking to you. Good questions.
Well, have a great rest of the day, Don. And with that, I think we conclude the live stream.
Okay. Bye, everyone.